Hello and welcome to Your Friend in the Darkness podcast. I'm Stephanie Vegano, your host, and today's topic is a little bit heavy. It's about my baby boy, Remy. So, last episode I talked about his birth, and this episode I'm going to delve into, I guess, his death, which sounds a little morbid. Okay, maybe it's really morbid, but it's got more than a silver lining to it. So I gave birth prematurely, and we'd spent about 53 days in the NICU, and I kind of still remember the day that he passed away. And it was a natural death in the end. Even though he had a lot of equipment at this point that was keeping him alive, things that we had then discerned were kind of extraordinary means of life. So things that were, keeping him alive, but also that could become burdensome to him. So we had sort of spoken with some priests and started to figure out the ethics of what was happening. We were having quite a bit of pressure to switch off his machines that were supporting him, in particular his ventilator. And so there's kind of a lot to unpack from this day. The main thing though was that, we'd had a lot of conversations leading up with the medical team, and he had a team of over 60 beautiful people, and they sometimes had different ethics to what we have, but I think they meant well. And I know that what we did was also considered maybe by some kind of selfish in a sense, to invest all of these resources into someone that may not live. But I think when you're a parent, your priority is, I'm going to hold hope for my child. And, it took a few conversations for me to actually understand that Remy was actually losing the battle. Like, there were hints of that because it seemed like all these other babies were graduating from the really intensive room that we were in. So there were three other babies in our room, and they kind of were slowly being cycled out and moving on to less and less support. But Remy just seemed to stay there. He was the one getting a bad report card, in a sense. So I think I was sort of starting to realize, this is kind of getting a bit tiresome. I don't know how long I can stay here. And I don't know. There was a lot of unknowns, and because they were, they kept being medical incidences and then eventually resuscitations, I started to kind of realize that I was actually getting tired too. But the day of Remy's death, it sort of had a lot of peace and closure to it. I think that morning we arrived at the hospital, and I just saw it. I saw it in his skin. He just looked like a blueberry. He was so purple. And we had sort of learned a little bit more about the machines, and I could see that, his saturation of his oxygen wasn't so good. And, he had full support of the machine, so that was as much as the ventilator could give. And I could just see it, that he was tired. And so we told the nurses that we were happy to try and move him into a private room. He'd still have his machines hooked up, but it would mean really switching into that palliative mode. So just to reduce the load on his body, to give him some more pain relief, and cut off his food supply, which was a big thing for me, especially as the mother. I had really struggled with producing breast milk for various reasons, but whatever I could produce, just a few drops, I would give to him through the tube. And he was also on, other donor milk and also some other, lipids, fats to fatten him up and other nutrition as well to help him. So that would all be changed when we moved into the other room. He'd just be on sucrose and he wouldn't starve, but it would be lighter on his stomach. So that's what we were told. And that kind of, I think as a mother, I felt like my duty to him is to feed my child. So that was also like a hard thing to process that day. But we also had a dream to take him to church with us. So what had been happening is that on a Sunday, we chose to leave him be with the nurses and go to church. And we were in another town, but it brought us a lot of comfort to be able to practice our faith. And it did feel a bit weird that we, I'd just given birth, but I didn't have a child to show for it in a sense. But for this day, we managed to get a priest who said he'll come in and say Mass with us. And then the hospital was able to allow both sets of our parents to come and join us as well in this special room. And so that was kind of the way we planned out the day. We kind of thought, all right, we'll get to celebrate Mass, and if at the end of the Mass he's alive, we'll take him out for a cuddle, and just to cuddle him might actually be the trigger for him to pass away. But we were thinking, that's kind of what we'll do because that's where he was at. He was in quite a fragile state. They could no longer change his nappy. Like everything had to be done really slowly, really gently because he just wasn't coping with little things. And we sort of had this moment of moving the machines, and they warned us even before we moved that you need to be ready to say goodbye. Even the movement of the machines might, shift one of his cords. But it was nice. They gave him a little dose of morphine before we moved him, and that kind of helped him as well relax. And we moved him, and of course the staff were emotional as well, and some other parents in the NICU were emotional for us. We met some beautiful people on the journey. And so we moved into the room, and the nurse changed charts. They were no longer logging, every rigorous little detail. Just his comfort. And there was some kind of simplicity to it. I just spent those last few hours just kind of sitting with him. And, letting my parents enjoy him as well because they hadn't actually met him properly. And then the nurse was just doing a routine clean of his tube, the breathing tube, and his heart didn't quite recover. And at that point, he had already been resuscitated like 3 times, and so it was just going to be too much for him. His cords were already quite swollen, so to get his breathing tube back in would just be too hard and a lot of trauma for him. And so they gave him a few breaths through the machine, and then it was go time. We're like, all right, well, we just want to cuddle him while his pulse is still going and he's technically alive. And that was when we kind of had our first uninterrupted cuddle without all these tubes. They just left his pain relief on, and I got to hold him. And what was really important to me is that he would taste the breast milk, not through a tube. So we managed to squeeze a little bit of that from our syringe and not have to worry about, a sterile Q-tip or whatever. I just put it from my hand into his mouth, and I could feel his tongue move ever so subtly. And for me, that was his last taste of earth, and it meant so much to me that I could do that for him in his last moments. And it was just a really powerful moment. I will share a beautiful photo with you, which I think is like a painting, but it was the moment he was passing away. And after he had passed, we were sort of just in a room together, and there was peace. But I know for sure there's a quote about it that you kind of stand at the vestibule of heaven, and that's how it felt. And within half an hour, the priest arrived to celebrate Mass, and we just let him know, actually, Remy's just passed away. And it was incredible. This Mass was just so peaceful and joyful. We could hold him the way we wanted to. And yeah, there was a lot of healing. A lot of healing happened, a lot of closure. He celebrated Mass, and a couple more family members were able to arrive at this point, and they joined us for the Mass. And the beautiful staff members, they were there to witness as well, and told us that they had never seen such joy after someone's death before. But it was true joy and true peace. And, those 24 hours kind of surrounding the death were quite surreal in itself. So it was probably the afternoon when he passed away, around 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. And another religious friend of ours in town was visiting. She came to visit his body. And then we all went to the pub and got dinner. Not before I had a big cry in the car before I came in. And I think that was my reminder that, the people that we see out in the world, they may have just buried someone when you're dealing with them at the grocery shop. So, yeah, just a reminder to be kind to people. You don't know what kind of a day they've had. And then the next morning, we were sort of still in this town that we don't belong in, but I couldn't quite leave yet. So we went to church in the morning. It was a Sunday. And the message was just exactly what I needed to hear. And I will share that message in text, I think. By the time I look it up, it will waste a bit of time. And that was the reading of the day. And I think we were all really touched by it. It really spoke into our situation in a whole new way. And yeah, we were just together and mourning. So that was the death of Remy. It was short and sweet, just like his life. And we had a lot of luxuries in that death. Like he was surrounded by loved ones. He wasn't in any pain. And we got to grieve, and we got to hold his body. And there are beautiful inventions that allow families to say goodbye, like the little cold cot that preserved him for a couple of hours. But then it was just time to let go. I just knew that, I just didn't need to hold him much after that final cuddle, because I just knew it was time to let him go. And yeah, that was the death of Remy. I'm not sure what else to add, really. I think, short and sweet, little Remy. I think the other thing to reflect on, though, is that there were just so many people that joined us on the journey of Remy. People from all around the world that were praying for him. People I still talk to this day, three years on. So I think, there's just been a lot of blessings in his little life. And that is the darkness that I've carried. And it's the darkness that I carry to this day. But I know there's been a transformation. I know there's been healing. And the things I've let go of, some of them aren't things that ever happened. Like some of the things I was grieving were just dreams. They weren't things that were real yet. And some of the things that I let go of are things that are currently happening. But I don't feel like I'm missing out. Like I look at kids that are about Remy's age, and I'm just excited for them. That I just know that Remy is part of their cohort, that he's with them, and that he's not missing out. And it's been a joy to meet these other little 3-year-olds that are in my life. And I do have a special love for them because, yeah, I just know Remy's their classmate. And he's watching over us. And I wouldn't have it any other way. I think, in those really heavy days of grief, initially, I think there was a lot of, I wish things were different. But, 3 years on, it's sort of just realizing that there's been a treasure and savoring the time we had with him. And of course, as I've now gone on to have other children, I do, sometimes think, wow, this is such a big joy. A joy that we didn't experience in a specific way with Remy. We had different joys with him. But, yeah, his life was so valid. And, he's been on the cover of international magazines. And he's been the topic of YouTube podcasts and interviews in the US. And also our local radio here in where I live in New South Wales. And now he's the topic of this podcast. So his story will live on regardless. And at first I was kind of confused by this concept of learning to carry the child in your heart, but now I know a little bit more about what that means. It has its benefits too, because right now I can just be heavily pregnant and have a 1-year-old and not have to worry about a 3-year-old burning down the house. So, But yeah, I look forward to sharing more with you next time. And also hearing from you as well. I hope you have an amazing day, and I'll see you next time.